She stopped mid-song. Just like that. Amy Winehouse, standing under the spotlight, her voice trailing into silence. The crowd froze. Thousands of people holding their breath, waiting for something, anything. But Amy wasn't looking at them anymore. Her eyes were locked on one person, sitting in the front row. An elderly man with gray hair, holding papers that trembled slightly in his hands. And in that moment, the entire venue understood that something extraordinary was about to happen. This is the story of the night Amy Winehouse came face to face with the man who taught her everything about music, and nothing could have prepared anyone for what happened next. London, 2007. The Shepherd's Bush Empire was packed. Every seat filled, every inch of standing room claimed by fans who had waited months for this night. Amy Winehouse was at the peak of her career. Back to Black had become an anthem, her voice a force of nature that seemed to channel decades of soul music through one fragile, tattooed body. Backstage, her manager was going through the usual pre-show checklist. Set list confirmed. Sound check done. But Amy seemed distracted, staring at a piece of paper someone had handed her earlier. A handwritten note on old yellowed stationery. "Amy, we need to go in 5," her manager said. She folded the note carefully, slipped it into her pocket, and walked toward the stage without a word. The lights dimmed. The crowd erupted. And Amy Winehouse stepped into the spotlight, her silhouette instantly recognizable, that towering beehive, those bold lines of eyeliner, the vintage dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a different era entirely. She opened with "Tears Dry on Their Own," and the audience was hers from the first note. That voice raw, aching, impossibly powerful for someone so small. She moved through the set with the kind of presence that made you forget you were in a room with thousands of other people. It felt personal. It always did with Amy. But then, halfway through, "Love is a losing game," something shifted. Amy's eyes scanned the front row, and suddenly, she stopped singing. The band played on for a few seconds before realizing she wasn't with them anymore. One by one, the instruments fell silent. The drummer's sticks hovered mid-air. The bassist looked up, confused. And the entire venue held its breath. Amy stood frozen at the microphone, staring at someone in the front row. Her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. And for the first time in her career, Amy Winehouse had no words. The man she was looking at was in his 70s, gray hair neatly combed, wearing a brown cardigan that had seen better days. In his lap, he held a folder of sheet music, the edges worn from decades of use. He looked up at her with the kind of gentle recognition that comes from years of knowing someone not as a star, but as a student. As a child. This was Mr. Patterson. Her first music teacher. 3 months earlier, Mr. Patterson had been diagnosed with late-stage cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe less. He'd spent 50 years teaching music to children in North London, retiring quietly 5 years ago to a small flat where he lived alone. His wife had passed 2 years before. His children lived abroad. And most days, his only companion was the radio and the memories of students who had once filled his classroom with noise and potential. Amy Winehouse had been one of those students. Not the best behaved, certainly. But the most memorable. The girl who could hear a melody once and play it back with feeling that kids twice her age couldn't manage. The girl who sang like she'd lived 100 lives. He'd kept every article about her success. Pinned them to his fridge. Played her albums on repeat. And when he got the diagnosis, he wrote her a letter. He didn't expect a response. Didn't even know if it would reach her. But he wrote it anyway, because he wanted her to know that of all the students he taught, she was the one who made him believe in the power of music to save a life. The letter found its way to Amy through an old-school connection. Someone who remembered that Mr. Patterson had once said, "That girl will either change the world or break her own heart trying." Amy read the letter backstage before the show. Read it 3 times. And when she walked on stage that night, she knew he would be there. She'd arranged it herself. Front row, center seat. A ticket with his name on it. But seeing him there, in person, was different. Because Amy Winehouse understood, in that moment, that the man who taught her how to read music was now dying. And music was the only thing she had to give back. She stepped away from the microphone, walked to the edge of the stage. The crowd murmured, unsure whether this was part of the show or something else entirely. Security moved forward, but Amy waved them off. "Mr. Patterson," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying through the silent room. "You came." The old man nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I wouldn't have missed it, Amy." She crouched down at the edge of the stage, eye level with him now. "You taught me everything. You know that, right?" He smiled, that same patient smile he used to give her when she'd get frustrated trying to learn a difficult chord. "You taught yourself, love. I just showed you where the keys were." Amy wiped her eyes, smudging the eyeliner she was famous for. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the letter he'd sent. "You wrote that I saved your belief in music. But you saved me first. Before I even knew I needed saving." The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. And then Amy Winehouse made a decision that no one saw coming. She stood up, turned to her band, and whispered something to the pianist. He nodded. She turned back to Mr. Patterson. "There's a song I wrote when I was 15. You helped me with the melody. Remember?" He nodded, his hands clutching the sheet music in his lap. "I never recorded it. Never played it for anyone else. But I want to play it now. For you." She walked back to the microphone, but this time, she didn't sing immediately. She looked out at the audience. "This man," she said, her voice steadier now, "taught me that music isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. And tonight I'm going to be honest with all of you. This song is called The Teacher's Song, and it's about the person who believed in me before I believed in myself." The pianist began to play. A simple melody, tender and achingly beautiful. And Amy Winehouse sang. The lyrics were raw. About a girl who didn't fit in, who felt too much, who found refuge in a classroom where an old man with infinite patience showed her that her voice mattered. About growing up and losing that safe space. About becoming famous and realizing that fame couldn't fill the emptiness that came from forgetting where you started. By the second verse, people in the audience were crying. By the third, Mr. Patterson had his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that were equal parts grief and joy. Amy's voice cracked on the final note, but she didn't try to hide it. She let it break. Let everyone hear the imperfection. Because that's what Mr. Patterson had taught her music was supposed to be. Human. When the song ended, the silence lasted for 5 full seconds. And then the applause came. Not the wild, screaming kind. The kind that sounds like relief. Like witnessing something sacred. Amy walked back to the edge of the stage. Mr. Patterson stood up, shakily, using his cane for support. She reached down, and he reached up, and their hands met. She held on tight. "Thank you?" she whispered. "No, love," he said. "Thank you." Subscribe now, because what happens next will stay with you forever. Amy helped Mr. Patterson onto the stage. Security started to object, but one look from Amy silenced them. She guided him to a chair the crew quickly brought out, and he sat down, overwhelmed, looking out at a sea of faces all focused on him. Amy knelt beside him. "I want you to stay here. For the rest of the show. I want you to see what you helped create." He nodded, unable to speak. She stood up, wiped her eyes one more time, and turned back to the microphone. "All right, London. Let's keep going." And she did. She sang every song on the set list, but something had changed. The performance was no longer just a show. It was a gift. Every note felt like it was being sung directly to the man sitting in the chair beside the piano. The audience felt it too. They weren't just fans anymore. They were witnesses to something deeply personal. When she sang, "Back to Black," she changed one of the lines. Instead of singing, "I died 100 times," she sang, "He saved me 100 times." Mr. Patterson heard it. And he smiled. After the final song, After the standing ovation that lasted so long the venue staff had to eventually turn the house lights on, Amy didn't leave the stage right away. She walked over to Mr. Patterson, helped him stand, and held his hand as they both looked out at the crowd together. "This man," she said into the microphone, "is the reason I'm here. And I need you all to remember something. Teachers don't just teach subjects. They teach people how to find themselves. So if you've ever had a teacher who believed in you, call them. Write to them. Don't wait until it's too late." The crowd erupted again, but this time it wasn't just applause. It was a collective understanding. A shared moment of gratitude for all the Mr. Pattersons in the world who quietly changed lives without ever expecting recognition. Backstage, after the show, Amy sat with Mr. Patterson in her dressing room. She'd kicked everyone else out. Just the two of them, like it used to be in that classroom so many years ago. "I don't have much time left, Amy," he said quietly. "I know. But tonight made everything worth it." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Inside was a necklace, a silver treble clef on a delicate chain. "I want you to keep this," she said. "And when you're gone, I want it to go to your family. So they know that you weren't just a teacher. You were someone who changed the world, one student at a time." He took the necklace, held it up to the light. "I'll treasure it. And I'll treasure you," Amy said. "For the rest of my life." But here's the part no one expected, the part that changed everything. 2 months later, Mr. Patterson passed away. His daughter called Amy personally to tell her. The funeral was small, quiet, attended mostly by former students who had tracked down the news through old school networks. Amy showed up wearing black, sunglasses covering her red eyes. She didn't perform. Didn't sing. But when it was time for people to speak, she walked to the front. "Mr. Patterson once told me that the best songs are the ones you're afraid to write," she said. "Because those are the ones that matter. And I was terrified to write that song I played for him. Terrified to admit how much I needed someone to believe in me. But he taught me that fear is just proof that something matters." She paused, looking at the simple wooden coffin. "So I'm going to keep writing the songs I'm afraid to write. And every single one of them will be because of him." After the funeral, Amy quietly set up a scholarship fund in Mr. Patterson's name. It paid for music lessons for kids who couldn't afford them. Kids like she had been. Kids who needed someone to believe in them before they could believe in themselves. She never publicized it. Never used it for press. It was just something she did, because that's what Mr. Patterson would have wanted. The necklace she gave him was buried with him, at his request. But before the burial, his daughter had a replica made. She sent it to Amy with a note. "He wanted you to have this. So you'd always remember." Amy wore it every day after that. In every interview, every performance, every photo, if you looked closely, you could see that small silver treble clef resting against her collarbone. 3 years later, when Amy Winehouse passed away, that necklace was still around her neck. Her family decided to keep it there. Because it represented something important. It represented the truth that Amy had spent her whole life trying to express through music. That we are all saved by the people who see us before we see ourselves. Mr. Patterson's daughter attended Amy's funeral. She didn't speak to the press. Didn't give interviews. But she stood in the back, tears streaming down her face, and whispered a quiet thank you to the girl who had given her father one last perfect night. The recording of the teacher's song was never officially released. It exists only in bootleg recordings made by fans that night. And those who were there say it's the most honest thing Amy Winehouse ever performed. Raw. Unpolished. True. Because that's what Mr. Patterson taught her. That music isn't about perfection. It's about connection. It's about standing in front of people and saying, "This is who I am. This is what I feel. And I trust you enough to let you see it." Amy Winehouse visited her former music teacher one last time. And his words didn't just leave her silent. They left her changed. Forever. Because the best teachers don't just teach music. They teach us how to be human.